social media director, and Caleb Morvan, our co-producer. And more on why we call this the Creemee cast later. But first, it has been amazing to watch the Zoe Saunders story unfold at the Vermont State House. From the minute Governor Scott introduced the former Fort Lauderdale education leader as his new Secretary of Education, the blob, yes, we call it the blob, also known as the professional education establishment advocacy groups and the friends in the legislature and media, bashed this pleasant young mother of two as some kind of unqualified newbie, a carpetbagger from a red state, a school choice hitman, or hit person, excuse me, a minion of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and worst of all, ignorant and uncaring of the educational traditions of our brave little state of Vermont. Well, most of the Senate clearly bought this argument. They voted 19-9 against the nomination. Undeterred, a couple of minutes after the Senate gavel fell, Governor Scott appointed her as his interim Secretary of Education, which the Vermont Constitution allows him to do. So some of these attacks on Saunders were just vicious. Senator Ann Cummings, who is a Democrat, said as much. Quote, "I have never felt this bad about Vermont because I'm learning that we aren't any different," Cummings said. "We may be blue, but we can be as vicious as anyone else." Scott was pretty blunt, too. "I think this was a partisan political hit job. So I would say that once they get through that and they get their pound of flesh, which they did, it was all against me." And a reporter said, "A pound of flesh? Really?" He said, "Absolutely. Pound of flesh, political hit job." Those were his very words. He was not happy. Now, one criticism in particular that is so wrong, I'm just amazed that the anti-Saunders forces propagated it, and even more amazed that the governor's people didn't immediately refute it. Over and over we heard, "She's from Florida. What does she know and care about Vermont? Just another hired gun." Not. Because the fact is, and here's what you haven't heard until now, Zoe Saunders has family in Vermont, a lot of family in Vermont. Her mother lives in Vermont, according to an administration source. She lives in a small town in Rutland County. Not just her mom, though. Saunders' sister lives in Vermont. And not just her mom and her sister, another sister lives in Vermont, and a niece, too. She goes to UVM. So this is news. And this matters because, as a certain wise man once said, "Where your treasure is, that's where your heart is." For most of us, our greatest treasure is our families. And Zoe Saunders' family, the loved ones she grew up with, now live right here in Vermont. In fact, that's how she learned about the job. Her sister saw it and in the news and gave her a call. She applied. The State Board of Education picked her as one of the 3 to send to the governor. And based on her resume qualifications, she got the job. So is she a public school lifer, the way some want her to be? Well, no. But she did spend 5 years as Fort Lauderdale's award-winning chief education officer. Maybe that counts for something, huh? Does she know Vermont? Not yet. But her first 100 days include a tour of the state to listen to students, parents, and educators. And is her heart in Vermont? Absolutely. So, Paul, we've really got to ask, why did the blob freak out over Saunders? You know, does it have something to do with maybe their fear of losing control here? School budgets being voted down? What is the latest, by the way, on this whole 3 strikes you're out thing? And what does this all mean?
Yeah, so to address a few things you mentioned there, one of the first things that I think I should point out is, so this 3 strikes and you're out thing. Yesterday, I went to report on the school budget revote, how they're going to talk about what they were going to do in the House Ways and Means Committee, how they were going to solve this problem. And if you've been following the story, they kind of had this idea that maybe after a certain number of votes or maybe a certain date that the voters would no longer be involved, which is a quote from Kurt Taylor, one of the legislators who sits on that committee. So I went to go to follow up.
Let me back up here.
Sure.
So what they were saying is if these voters vote down a budget 3 times, they pass a law that says the school budgets can just impose a budget?
Yes, exactly. That was that. And I actually asked the governor in the press conference on Wednesday, do you think that's a good idea? And he said, no, absolutely not. And I actually went and spoke to him a little bit after the press conference, and he added, if they wanted to, they could just take $5 off the budget 3 times, and then what would it even matter to vote on your school budget in the first place?
Well, that's rather perceptive.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yes. Why are we even bothering to vote?
Exactly.
Right.
So I went to report on the House Ways and Means Committee meeting yesterday. It was at 9 a.m. And I was excited about it, like, woohoo, gonna really crack a story here, man, And I show up, and there's nobody there.
It was like on their agenda, they were going to be talking about this?
Yeah, that was the plan at 9 a.m. That was the plan.
In their committee room at the State House?
Yes.
Got it. Okay,
yes.
Sorry. I'll stop interrupting.
No, you're not interrupting. You're adding the important details that I'm leaving out. But so anyway, I show up, nobody's there, and I heard from a source inside the committee that apparently they didn't want to be on the record talking about this, which seems a little convenient. I don't know.
Imagine that. Why wouldn't they want to be on the record, Paul?
Well, I think they were probably a little bit rattled by the outcry of people saying that is anti-democratic. That kind of that removes the role of the voter ultimately, and it's kind of a big deal.
What was that Revolutionary War slogan you used last week on this show?
What was it? No taxation without representation?
Indeed.
Yeah. So anyway, you asked also why do I think that they're so concerned about this? Well, it took me a really long time to figure this out. And I think it hasn't quite hit everyone yet either, why this is such a big deal. Even a lot of the legislators. I think it's the people who are playing the game, the chess on the chessboard at the higher levels. They kind of realize what's going on, but the rest of us are a little bit maybe in the dark. I think it's a battle for Vermont's future, ultimately. And it's a battle for how this state is going to be shaped and how the minds of Vermonters and young Vermonters specifically, how their minds are going to be shaped. Because, Guy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the NEA, Superintendents Association, the Vermont Principals Association, they seem to be obviously major players in this conversation.
Sure are.
Right? And, nationally, the NEA has a huge lobbyist group. And some might even say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but in some ways they're kind of like an arm of the Democratic Party, which is ultimately the arm of the globalists, as far as I'm concerned, and the green energy industry, and all of this, climate hysteria that they're coming out of these organizations. So, when we're talking about how the shape of Vermont and how the state is going to be shaped in the future, I just tell you a quick story. Is like, and I think I've talked about this on the show multiple times. It's like when I was coming through school, especially middle school, I can remember being up at night thinking, oh my goodness, what's the point? Climate change is going to kill the planet. We're all going to die.
You really thought that?
Oh, I really thought that. Yeah, wow. Well, that's what they teach you in school. I remember I used to be afraid, like, especially when I was younger, like, oh my God, it's going to flood and it's going to come over the mountains. It's going to flood. They teach that in school.
Wow. See, I've sort of heard that, but I just sort of figured it was like hyperbole.
I mean,
but no, you really lived that.
Oh, it's very real.
Wow.
Very real. Like I say, especially in middle school. I don't have any fault in my elementary school upbringing. It was great. Middle school, high school, a little different. Yeah. And not to knock I had good teachers too. Don't get me wrong. I really did. But there's an agenda ultimately within the system, because when you look at the education system, it is really a big social program to some degree. So anyway, I guess my point and where I'm going with this is it seems that the conversation has gotten so nasty because it truly is a battle for how the minds of the future of Vermonters will be shaped. And that's fairly controversial. And Zoe Saunders does not fit the role that the Vermont Democratic Party wants her to be. She just doesn't. And actually, I don't think it matters who the governor would have, whoever he put in that position. And he said this too in his press conference. It literally doesn't matter who he put in. Just because he put somebody in, they don't like it. But maybe you can add to that a little bit.
Seems to have gotten that toxic. Do we have any comments yet?
Yes, we have quite a few comments.
Right.
Yeah,
Bring
let's
them
see.
on.
Let's see. Actually, concerning Zoe,
Who's this from?
This is from Libby Moyer. Okay. Concerning Zoe, Lieutenant Governor took it upon himself to make and publish inferences that were entirely false and besmirched Zoe's earned track record. Yeah, thank you very much, Libby, for your comment. We really, really appreciate people commenting. And actually, the governor also spoke about this in his press conference. Somebody asked him about that. Yeah. And apparently, Lieutenant Governor Dave Zuckerman, he took back what he had said and he apologized. Yeah. But he didn't do it until the end of the confirmation hearing, which is just...
That's right. And as the Lieutenant Governor presiding over the Senate, it's one hard and fast rule. You do not try to influence the discussion. You're just the moderator when you're an LG presiding over the Senate. And he apparently, wow, did he ever cross that line? And it's kind of tough to say, oh, I take it back now after the Senate has voted 19-9 against. And who knows, maybe your comment influenced them. So the Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman also just announced that he's running for re-election.
No surprises there.
I don't know if perhaps some voters might be remembering that. But anyway.
So we have another comment from Lisa Bombardier. Kurt Taylor is the representative of my district. Angry face emoji. I have a piece of my mind on the whole S show. We need good people to run against these clowns. Thank you very much, Lisa, for your comment. And, I can't say I disagree with you, to be honest.
So, Lisa, good friend of mine, Rachel Stringer, is the head of the Colchester Town Republican Committee. If you are of the Republican persuasion and you might be interested in running, or you know someone who would, just as someone who supports open democracy, I encourage you, if you feel that way, reach out to Rachel Stringer. Reach out to another sort of Republican person you know who's involved, and run. Or find someone who will. Because one thing I really think they're banking on here is they look at the Republican Party as perhaps not in its finest hour.
To say the least.
Yeah.
Which is not false. I mean,
and so they're thinking, well, we can kind of do what we want because even though in November they may be hard pressed to put up good candidates against us. And if you feel strongly about the incumbents, there's really only one thing you can do, and that's run or find someone who will and support them.
So we have another comment from Boltz Brenier. My fiance and I currently live in Florida. We are both Vermonters. We would love to move home next spring. Please do. But seeing how things go this fall, definitely watching the school board issues because that'll determine if we start a family back home or stay in Florida. Thanks for a good podcast, guy. You're welcome.
Wow.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you very much. I'm curious to know how many kids do they have? How old are they? What's the main impediment? Is it housing? Is it something about maybe taxes? What's sort of what's holding them back? If you want to write back a comment, we'd sure love to see it.
So, guys, staying on that point, talking about candidates and the potential of running for office. On the flip side, we're talking about how the Republican Party has struggled to put up candidates against Democrats.
Sure.
Well, interesting news the last
Yeah,
week on
I
the other
guess.
side of this, the potential of former Governor Howard Dean.
Yeah.
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 That was my best impression, everybody. Well, he's potentially
He's learning, everyone.
Yeah, I'm learning. He's thinking about running for governor, from what I understand. And he actually even put out a press release to the public saying, "Yeah, I'm thinking about it. What do you make of that?"
Right. Part of me, the sort of cynical, suspicious part of me, says that if he does run, it's about money. And as it often is in politics, one way or another, it's kind of about money. It's people don't really know this, but the state Democratic Party is not always all that strong and powerful an organization. The candidates are strong. The Submerge Vermont training boot camp, very strong. But the state party is sometimes a little kind of bouncy and dysfunctional. And part of me thinks that Howard Dean might run for governor. And Phil Scott says, whoa, run for my money at last. And I need to raise a lot of money. So the Republican money that might have gone to the candidates who desperately need it to beat incumbents, because unfortunately you need money for advertising and that kind of thing, and literature and stuff. So that Republican money might be hoovered up by the governor's campaign.
Okay.
It perhaps would not be the first time that has happened in recent Vermont history. And the other thing is that Howard Dean, whatever else one might say about him, he's got a lot of out-of-state, deep pocket money contacts.
Yeah.
And he's
make of that what you will.
New York for a while, and he's former current chair of the DNC.
I think he's former chair of the DNC.
He knows a lot of people who have money. One would suspect that he probably could just, as a favor, call in enough to run a good campaign.
Yeah.
Leaving other donors to give to hard-pressed incumbents.
Yeah.
So I could see how they might strategize it as, well, this is, we're in a difficult circumstance, and running to the rescue is Howard Dean.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems kind of comical to me. I don't know. Just seems a little comical to me. And I put out a tweet on Twitter, obviously. Actually, excuse me, X. I put out an X post earlier this week, and it was a screenshot of a part of his press release talking about how in some ways this is the best legislature he's seen in Montpelier. And
Wow, did he really say that?
He did, yeah.
Oh.
Which, I mean, either he's delusional or he's lying. And I kind of go with the latter. I think he's a smart guy. I think he probably knows that there's problems within the legislature, but he's trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to say to win here? What do I need to say to get the support of ultimately all the legislators that currently are incumbent? So and all of their voters, for that matter. He's got to say, oh, they're doing a fine job, right? Which I don't know. I can't imagine that that's a winning strategy, but hey, man, what do I know?
At least, they've won every election for the last 3 or 4 years. They've been picking up seats, so they're doing something right. Whether they can do it again this year, who knows?
It'll be interesting to find out.
Yeah. Any other comments?
Yes, Timothy Page, he writes, they wanted an insider. It reminds me of when Eusebius, the Roman emperor, did I say that right?
I have no idea.
I knew you would appreciate.
Yes, it reminds me of that too, Tim. I just automatically think of that.
It reminds me of when Eusebius, the Roman emperor, tried to get Christianity an approved religion in the empire. I guess I'm a little confused about the comment, Tim. Let's see. Libby Moyer writes, Dean, there is big money in 2030 30-30 ideology. So I think she means the 30 for 30 and 50 for 50.
Sure.
That does seem like there's big money in that.
That would not surprise me. Okay.
Timothy Page also writes, a Zucker born every minute.
Good one, Tim.
That's harsh, Tim. That's harsh.
Okay. Well, Now might actually be a good time, Paul, for you to tell us why in the world, or do you want me to, we call this the Creemee Cast.
Well, I have, obviously, you know by now, I do have a Creemee machine here. And we've maybe even had a couple Creemies, which is great. We're having fun with that. Soft serve ice cream for any.
Let me stop you for a minute there. I know it's rude to interrupt, but I want to show you this. Okay. And the operative word here is the heavy cream. I've been on a kind of no fat, low carb diet. Well, I took one for the team to promote this broadcast. Had to have a Creemee. And let me tell you, is it good?
Yeah.
And Paul said the secret is that he uses a particular kind of heavy cream.
Yeah, it's 10% mix, which is 10% milk fat. A lot of people, they'll do 5% or they'll dilute it a little bit and do 7.5%. But right. I think I'm going to stick with the 10% because it's really good.
You'll get them coming back for that 10%,
yeah.
man.
Yeah. So just to say a little more, I mean, yeah, I'm going to be opening a Creemee stand in the very near future, potentially next week. There's a few things that I'm still kind of waiting on, but it does seem like it's either going to be next week or the middle of May. So
and where is here?
Well, if you've ever been to Rocket J's in Northfield, which is my uncle's food truck, that's where it is. 470 North Main Street, Northfield, Vermont, 05663.
Okay.
And we've had a few different guests come on, and they've seen the machine. They're like, "What are you doing with that?" Well, now you know. We're going to be open, and really looking forward to it. I mean, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it'll be a good way to bring in new people to come on the show, and I think we'll just really continue to grow what we're doing here, the Vermont Daily Chronicle, and spreading our message and our reporting. And it's really cool. I'm excited about this. I think everybody I've talked to about it is pretty excited about it. Everybody who's part of it is. So
if you haven't figured out yet, folks, Paul is an entrepreneur. It's not just the Creemee thing. He had, or maybe still does have, a thing where you sell used books? Is that still a thing?
No, I don't. I'm not doing that anymore. I did that for a while through Amazon, which, interestingly enough, Zoe Saunders has an Amazon connection, Jeff Bezos connection, believe it or not. Yeah,
really?
Or maybe that's an episode. That's another episode.
Well, Allison, just throw that one out.
I know.
Paul.
Allison Despathy mentioned that to me actually on this show a couple weeks ago. And I think it'd be great to have her back on to maybe do a deep dive into that. But anyway, yeah, I was selling books online on Amazon. At one point, we had an 18-wheeler here full of books, and I unloaded them with my grandfather, of course, on a forklift. And we sorted them, we went through them, and I sold a lot of them. And that was fun. That was while I was in college. I actually was able to really fund a lot of my college existence and even pay for some of my college existence, like the actual tuition itself. But we have a few more comments. Jonathan writes, Republicans can't win in Vermont until either Phil Scott steps down or gets wholeheartedly behind the Republican Party to provide unconditional support for down-ticket candidates. What do you think of that?
I think that is probably true, and Phil is not alone. I've never had anything critical to say about Governor Jim Douglas, who I think was just a fantastic governor and a wonderful man. But one of the knocks on both him and on Phil Scott is that the gubernatorial coattails do not seem very long, and one of the reasons for that is don't always knock themselves out in supporting the down ticket candidates. I suppose some candidates and elected officials might say that that's unfair, but I don't think it is. I've heard a fair amount of that for some reason there's not a lot of simpatico there, and some of it clearly is the T word, the Trump word.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because the governor has his point of view on that, and some candidates have a completely different point of view. But even those that do. Perhaps something. He's the most popular governor in the country.
I believe in history.
81%. And he keeps polling around 80, which is just really remarkable. And it may be that he's saying, yeah, that's because no one's too worried about the partisan part. But if I start getting really partisan, well, then maybe some of my electability goes into decline there too.
I don't think he is a partisan. Like, he's just not a partisan character.
Yeah, he's really not.
He's really not. Like, and they're going to try to paint him as that. I think they're already trying to. Like, I read Jim Dandino, my good buddy. I read his newsletters. Yeah, I read his newsletters and I laugh because they're trying to like paint him as some sort of like, these are the strategies that Republicans are using in D.C. and it's like it's just so uncomparable. Right. It's projection is what it is. It's pure projection. Jonathan writes again, his disdain for the GOP has destroyed the party. No cohesiveness equals lost elections. Now, I get it. You know, this kind of segues into Rob Williams' comments. He writes, Paul, how did you get the endorsement of all three of the Republican trifecta, Scott, Douglas, and Doobie? So yeah, when I ran in 2022 for state senate, Washington County, I earned the endorsement of Phil Scott, Jim Douglas, and Brian Doobie. And I'm very proud of that.
Did any of them come and campaign for you? Did you do anything with them, jointly with them?
What did I do? I can't really say I did anything with them. One thing Phil and I did was send out a mailer together, which that was pretty cool, with a picture of him and I on the back of it. You know, that was pretty special. That's special to me. And you know, I had listed other names of people. But can I say that anyone campaigned with me? Did Phil come with me anywhere, or did I go anywhere with him? I'm trying to think. I don't remember. There was a couple events I was at that he was at, but they were his events. You know, I was just welcome there.
Okay.
Which was good, and I think maybe that's a good way to do it. But yeah, I mean, Jim Douglas, I don't think I even met him. I think he just said he heard good things about me and said, okay, I'll endorse you, which I was thankful for. And I feel the same way about Jim, by the way, from what I can remember and from what I learned about him is he really was just a stand-up guy as governor. You know,
one of the funniest people you ever meet too, and just incredible dry humor. So there's a couple.
But just one more comment. Lisa Bombardier, she writes, "Are you related to the Bean Chevrolet peeps?" Actually, believe it or not, we are currently filming this episode in the showroom here at what was formerly Bean Chevrolet. So yes, I am related to those peeps very closely. Love those guys.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, truly.
So a couple stories before we sign off in a couple of minutes. Really should be checking out in the Chronicle today. Chelsea Green is a publishing house that a truly independent, dedicated to free speech and to high quality writing and publishing, and has just undergone a ownership change. And Alison Despathy wrote a terrific column on Chelsea Green and Margot Baldwin and Ian Baldwin. Really encourage you to check it out.
Yeah.
If you haven't read it, it's not exactly what we always write about, but boy, is it a great piece. I really encourage you to take a look.
Yeah, just a note on Ian and Margot for that matter, but Ian more specifically, he's involved in an organization that I'm part of, Our Geoengineering Age.
Okay.
And to hear this news that they've sold their publishing house is not shocking. I'm not shocked to hear this. I've met Ian recently, and he said, he was talking a little bit about this kind of stuff, but he didn't say anything like that. But Ian is, the type of stuff that I guess the point that I'm trying to make is the books that they were publishing, especially in the last, say, 10 years, maybe a little bit less than that, it correlates very much to the subject that I was working on, and I am working on currently with Ian, which is geoengineering. And he's willing to go a lot of places, and Margot for that matter, by the way, who takes more of a beating than anybody on, like with VT Digger, for example.
7 days.
Yeah, 7 days. Yeah, brutal. I mean,
Yeah.
ruthless with the stuff they've said. Unsubstantiated, by the way.
That's right.
Which is typical.
Well, they published Joe Mercola's book on COVID-19.
That's right. Well, exactly. Yeah.
COVID deniers, et cetera, et cetera. And we're talking about courageous, independent publishing. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily have to agree with everything, but you're glad that someone is out there speaking the truth as they see it, backing it up, and publishing it for people to read.
For sure. For sure. Well, you know what, Guy? On that note, it is 4:30.
Yes, it is.
And I want everyone to know this is the most live viewers we've ever had at the number 52, the highest we've ever had. We'll take that. Yeah. That means we're doing something right, Guy. We're getting there. We're getting there.
We're getting there.
I hope you enjoyed, everybody.
Yep. And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next Friday at 4 for